been blaming the pandemic for the financial anxiety and poor living conditions people are facing. But the truth is, these conditions were already there. The pandemic certainly exacerbated inequalities, but they were already there. The poverty, the financial anxiety, the homelessness, it exists in every riding across this country. And I'm sure my colleagues can relate with the calls they receive in our offices on a weekly basis. The ones that break my heart, the ones I lose sleep over, are the ones for which there is no solution, except to implement guaranteed livable income, or GLI. Why do we need GLI now? At the beginning of this pandemic, the government made it clear that Canadians who found themselves suddenly without work required $2,000 per month to live. Does this government realize that in my home province of New Brunswick, I have constituents living on $564 per month? The pandemic has inflamed income insecurity, particularly for low and minimum wage workers. It has resulted in a run on rents, as my colleague, the member for Nanaimo Ladysmith, has been saying. Those who qualify for government relief benefits are doing okay. But what about those that never qualified, or those whose benefits are about to expire? The Prime Minister often says no one will be left behind. But in truth, this patchwork approach to financial support is leaving countless Canadians behind, and at a high cost for taxpayers. I am more than confident in saying that GLI is the solution to so many of the problems we face. In one swoop, this government could end poverty. I think of the person living on fixed pensions or disability benefits, for whom the cost of living goes up every year, outpacing what little inflation those benefits receive. The people trying to sleep in Wilmot Park in Fredericton, who are being moved along by police. They could be able to afford rent. The senior who spent years of her life providing unpaid care for everyone around her, now scraping by on pennies in her elder years. The woman fleeing intimate partner violence, for whom escape no longer needs to mean poverty or the risk of losing her children. GLI is also a solution to some systemic inequality. Our current patchwork programs have problems with systemic racism, ableism, and misogyny. If this government is truly serious about addressing these insidious issues, this is the most effective way to start that work. And let's not ignore the economic benefits. A GLI would reduce Canada's growing poverty crisis, thereby reducing the demand for social services, law enforcement, and healthcare. A report by the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis shows that GLI could be a sustainable investment that grows our economy $80 billion per year, creates hundreds of thousands of jobs, and supports Canada's businesses, all while lifting 3.2 million Canadian families out of poverty. We've seen this work with the child tax benefit. It's time to take it a step further. Finally, I also believe this is the best opportunity to fight for our planet. There is an innate privilege in the environmental movement because people cannot get involved in fighting the climate crisis if they have to focus on their basic needs and day-to-day survival. Individuals and communities cannot make changes to how they live and work, to transition from fossil fuels to build a sustainable and low-emission economy while building back from COVID-19 and living in crushing poverty. GLI would provide a financial safety net for all persons in Canada, especially through major economic shifts, natural disasters, major industry automation and job loss, as well as global pandemics. We are told to brace for more, but without adequate universal supports, what do we expect people to hold on to? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development.
Thank you very much, and it's I think the first time I've got to answer a question from this new member, and I have to say I worked in a newsroom with someone called Bob Hunter, who was the person who termed the phrase Greenpeace, and in fact had membership card number 1, and he never joined the Green Party. And part of the problem was the wonky approach the party used to have to using conservative-style tax credits to achieve environmental goals and nothing else. And I'm glad to see that the Green Party joining the social justice conversation with good ideas and with individuals who have broadened the conversation around what justice looks like in a social context. And so I welcome this question, and I welcome the idea. The member down the row, I guess, but we're virtually now, so across the screen, talked about seniors, about people with disabilities, about the homeless, about people stuck in the gig economy, whether it's the tech gig economy or the seasonal employment that defines parts of New Brunswick, and also talked about the success and what the child benefit has taught us, because the child benefit is a form of guaranteed income. It guarantees incomes for all families. It's means tested in a way that's sensitive, and it has delivered hundreds of thousands of kids out of poverty because it's there for them day in, day out, month in, month out. Those are policies that the Green Party actually supported us in our first budget, whereas the NDP didn't. But on those policies, Johnny, the minister who was in charge at the time, I was about to say his name, but is now head of Treasury Board, When I was his parliamentary secretary, he talked about changing the social safety net into a trampoline, about pulling the cords apart, understanding which ones need to be thicker, not there to catch people, but to bounce people back up. And the federal government provides several different forms of income support that when you look at them as a collection is a form of basic income. But because they are separate programs, there are cracks between them. And those are the very cracks that the member opposite is talking about that people fall between. We saw this with the disability approach to people with disabilities during the pandemic. The federal government, we didn't have a coordinated single database of people receiving the benefit because of this patchwork of tax credits and provincial programs, veterans benefits, and CPP. When we knit that back together again, we found that we could actually do more with a cohesive and a coordinated approach as opposed to that patchwork approach or those single strands in the social safety net, which are good enough for some, but not good enough for all. And so we've started to take a look at the seniors pension and boosting OAS and looking at how seniors poverty rolls through generationally as seniors grow older. We're taking a look at the disability pension and done it through the lens of disability rights legislation we passed in the last parliament. We have strengthened the national housing strategy, not from the $40 billion the Prime Minister referenced earlier this year. We're now closer to $72 billion, and the Rapid Housing Initiative is filling those gaps and making a difference in people's lives in Fredericton, in New Brunswick in particular. In terms of the gig economy and the child benefit, I agree. We had a meeting today at the Human Resource Committee of Parliament. We looked at the way EI does and doesn't function. It's built for an employment structure from the last century with a computer system that's almost even older than that. It's time for massive reform. And whether you call it basic income, guaranteed income, universal income, the name is not so important. I don't care about the bumper sticker. I care about the policy. It is time for all of us as parliamentarians to take a look at how the new economies have emerged in our ridings, whether we're in the north, the remote, the coast, downtowns, small towns, or small municipalities across the prairies, or in the north. We have got to find a way to reform EI, to restructure the income streams the federal government supports, and to achieve the goals you've spoken about. Who gets the credit? Whose bumper sticker is best? I could care less. But the issues you're raising are the right ones. The issues that we're working on are the same ones. And I hope that you see us moving towards that goal, even if we don't achieve it unnecessarily under the banner you've given us. But I think it's time for this government, and what COVID has taught us through this process is that we can do better because better is possible. And for that, I'm quoting the Prime Minister.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so grateful for the words that the Parliamentary Secretary shared just now, and I feel that momentum. So really, though, the question for me is, what kind of society do we want to live in, to raise our children in? And that's kind of what we're grappling with right now, especially as we face the COVID-19 recovery. So for me, we should be making government decisions based on quality of life measurements. Every Canadian has the right to live in dignity, with access to a livable income, accessible, affordable housing, food security, expanded health services, including mental health services, and the resources they need to meet their basic human needs, no matter their status in life. A GLI is a pillar to ensure well-being. Without the creation of the CERB and other emergency benefit programs, millions of people in Canada would have been in dire straits. It's not a leap to suggest that CERB kept people alive. And even with these emergency benefits, too many people are still falling through the cracks without support as the pandemic continues, as the member mentioned. The question is, what will replace these benefits when they're gone? And you mentioned reform, and I just feel GLI is here for us. There's been many pilots and projects that we have lots to draw from. A common criticism of GLI is that the CERB has been, or that it may be difficult to recruit workers. And we know that based on other results that this is actually not true. We can actually see an increase in part-time work by 17% in an Alaskan study. So once again, the momentum for GLI in building across party lines and within civil society is there. But we cannot rebuild a house on a foundation.
Well, we'll have to leave it at that. The Honourable Parliament Secretary.
I would encourage my colleague to reach out to the member from Markham-Stouffville, who actually, as a provincial minister in Ontario, built a basic income pilot project in Hamilton, only to see the Conservatives destroy it, despite the fact it was showing great promise. Because one of the findings, the early findings before it was allowed to report out fully and had its work destroyed by the Ford government, one of the early findings was that it actually encouraged people to work, that people actually saw a way to use social benefit to improve their standing in their own lives. And so I agree with her that the time has come for concerted action, and I hope that she would reach out and discuss the findings of that report, because the member in our caucus is a wealth of information. So too the minister from the Treasury Board. It's his life work as a professor in Laval, and his thoughts on it are absolutely phenomenal. But the issue is this: is that basic income alone will not solve problems. Basic income alone does not create a housing system that you can afford just because you have the rent money. The system, we have to design systems for basic income to work within. And on housing in particular, which is one of the key drivers of poverty, one of the key drivers of health outcomes, and the justice to which she speaks, without the housing system in place, without intentionally building affordable housing, if we've put all the money into basic income and we don't spread it through those other systems, access to childcare, access to healthcare, access to housing systems, and access to this country's wealth is limited for far too many people. And so while we have to achieve on income reform, we also have to build the systems around it to make that income reform work better, work harder, and deliver real results to real people. I look forward to the conversation.